Hello there, this is James Escroft from James 1978, and whenever you hear anyone say something along the lines of, back in the good old days, wasn't everything better back when, make America great again, or take back control, regardless of the specific words and phrases that are used, and regardless of whether they're aware of it or not, they are either subtly or not so subtly appealing to a past that never actually existed, meaning that therefore they're not talking about the past at all. Instead, they're talking about the future, longing to reshape the real world according to their will. Or in other words, to quote the title of this video, at least in this specific context, nostalgia isn't about the past, it's about power. Whether they're lamenting that scary black and brown people are destroying the country, women aren't getting married and having children anymore, or so-called millennials are simply lazy, in their minds they're imagining a better world in which the people in question behave the correct way, or even better, don't exist at all, since the way that things are now makes them feel uncomfortable. And because of some strange quirk of human psychology, they convince themselves that this better world existed in the past, along with most, if not all, of the other memories that make them feel comfortable and happy, regardless of whether they actually existed or not. However, the fact that in almost every case this better world only existed in their own imaginations is utterly irrelevant, because either way the point remains that they want that emotionally comfortable world to exist now, today, in real life. This at the very least makes them more willing to support authoritarian, draconian and downright fascist politicians and political parties, leaders, governments and policies, and because they can convince themselves that they are simply restoring the natural order, that this is how things used to be before the immigrants began ruining the country, or lax parenting and lack of national service meant that children grew up spoiled and lazy, and so on and so forth, this comforting myth allows them to convince themselves that they are still the good guys. Indeed, right-wing political parties, media outlets and other organisations have long since figured out how to weaponise this nostalgia for a past that never actually existed, realising that instead of calling for all illegal, which is to say black, brown and poor immigrants and refugees to be deported, imprisoned or killed, they just have to appeal to the good old days when immigrants entered the country legally, i.e. were white, and most of their supporters won't even be aware that they're being grossly xenophobic and racist. On the contrary, in fact, they will fanatically defend the politicians and what have you against any such allegations, because allowing that illusion to be shattered would mean admitting that their better world never existed, that immigrants in the past were treated just as badly, if not worse, even when they were white. I'm not racist, but wanted to get rid of them just as badly, and they told themselves exactly the same thing. So remember, regardless of how they may do so or what terms or phrases they use, whenever anyone talks, writes or otherwise waxes nostalgic about the good old days or the golden age in reference to something that supposedly changed, which they don't like, specifically when it involves other people, don't worry, I'm not saying that all nostalgia is bad, since there's a fundamental difference between longing for the good old days of Doctor Who and longing for the good old days when women knew their place. Regardless of whether or not they even realise that they're doing it, they're using a dog whistle, and precisely because their false memory is their happy place, pointing out to them that the supposed past that they are yearning for never actually existed is a waste of time at best, and will only drive them into even more fanatical denial at worst. Because after all, the entire point and purpose of longing to superimpose their happy little fantasy world onto real life is to make themselves feel better, and so irony of ironies, admitting to themselves that, yeah, I don't care how many people I have to oppress just as long as I'm happy, would kind of defeat the entire point. Meaning that ultimately the only genuine difference between declaring that for the sake of national security all Muslims should either be forcibly converted, deported or executed, and wasn't this country so much safer back when we were a Christian nation, if only we could somehow go back to that golden age, is that the first statement is much more open, honest and direct.